session, we have Mr. Ravi Veeraraghavan, Partner Risk Advisory. Mr. Ravi is a partner in the Risk Advisory practice. He's a chartered accountant and certified information systems auditor with over 25 years of experience in process risk assessment, forensic reviews, process improvement, internal internal control evaluation and project management. Mr. Ravi is specialized in setting up of processes, controls around compliance management, risk management, and audits, comprising both IT and operational process in healthcare sector and IT-related companies. And Mr. Ravi has led various assignments like business process reviews, internal audits, development of SOP, COVID healthcare compliance, which will be very relevant, and developing compliance framework, and led the team in identifying process improvements, identification of key risk areas, and presentation of reports to audit committees and board of directors. He's worked on several clients in various capacities, including engagement quality reviewer, engagement leader, ISO quality lead within and outside India. Mr. Ravi is a board member on IAA Chennai chapter, and he's also TMT leader for the risk advisory practice in India. He's also a speaker in various forums such as CIA, ICACA, IAA, and ICA. So thanks for accepting to delivering the session today, sir. So we would like to get to know more from you and get the best of experience from you. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for the introduction, and thanks all the fellow members and also the doctors. And before I start, I have to hats off to the doctors who are doing a great job in the current situation, because interestingly, just to correlate, yesterday I was in a function where I saw Dr. Arvind Selvaraj. So Arvind is also a close friend, and Dr. Manivannan I know from, we've been working with Dr. Manivannan for some time. So it's interestingly to listen to what he was sharing his experiences in the last few months. And he's also internationally returned doctor. So one of the first things he made a comment was, it's a completely new experience, and everybody's going through this new experience, the situation which is completely unanticipated, and how we are being challenged pillar to post. And all credit to the doctor community to do a great job. And just to thanks, madam, and thanks Shankar Narayan sir and Saraswati madam for inviting us. I have Srivatsan also on my call. Srivatsan also healthcare and a practitioner of healthcare from a perspective of life sciences, healthcare, business plans, health plans. It's a very wide range topic. And whenever we go through some of these new topics, we get challenged how technology is really playing a key role in some of this. So as we go through some of the slides, feel free to just chat, put a stop here wherever you have questions. It's a very brief 1.5 hour session. We've had some slides, but it's more inward looking a bit, and then a future looking as well. Future looking, we put some slides from a future looking perspective, because how healthcare is changing, and in the current scenario, how it is really challenging the situation. Because as you know, the virtual health, and we see a lot of AI, robotics coming to play. So I will be using some jargons here and there. Just feel free to stop me and just put it up on your chat box. I can able to answer somewhere during the session or after the session. So one of the major things which is happening, one of the topics for this session, 3 or 4 topics, we thought one of the future of health is just forward looking, how industry is moving, how technology is helping, how this whole supplier chain management chain, and it's a very technology driven sector, looks like it. It's so that's area that I like it, because I lead the technology for the country, and whenever I see financial services and healthcare, I think it's very similar. And healthcare, the way they've advanced on a technology front when you do industry benchmarks is interesting. So we will touch upon some of the topics, and then coming from a risk management, typical risk, what is the forecast into the future again, does it work in silos, etc., etc. Controls and fraud detection. Typical case studies, we just push some cases out, some examples, and then Srivatsan might talk a bit on the lean management as well. And then final slides, 2 or 3 slides we have for how the future looks. Again, slightly forward looking on some of these slides, because it's very critical. The current situation is challenged us so much really we need to think very, very differently, and especially from healthcare community. Why I thought this topic, we use the future of health as a topic, is because the way patient care is changing, the way doctors are being challenged from a specific care perspective, how the infrastructure of the hospitals is getting challenged. And some of the thoughts we put here is from our lot of materials we picked out. If you need some of the, we've got a series of videos which I pulled out. If you need it, I can share it with the chamber and the chamber can pass it to you. It's a complete set of new technology, how the future is looking like for the thing, how it is being adopted and how it is helping in the clinical trial as well. It's not only the financial or risk aspect, but how the clinical trial is completely changing the world. And especially this pandemic is really challenging for various reasons. And hopefully the back office and the front office will take care. So that's why I'm just starting with this topic to begin with, and then going into the main topic of risk management. Go ahead, Sri. Next slide, Sri. This is a slightly heavy-duty slide. The wealth care or the value chain, as we call it. So value chain is various aspects. You see, we call the first layer as the strategic. If you see the left to the bottom, one is the strategic value chain. Second is the core business, which supports the value chain. And third is the back office or the tools which help them. So really from a value chain perspective, what is the value it happens? How does it happen? The speed of delivery it happens, how the quality happens, and the availability happens. So from the first aspect, I'll just talk one or two just thought processes on one of these topics, because I can share the slides later with you. But the important aspect is the first one, the business planning and strategy. Why I put that topic as first of the topics is how, even as a practitioner or a clinical practitioner or a doctor who run their own things, how do we really invest in? And one of the topics we've been having is from a virtual health perspective. If you're a doctor, what do you really want to do? Whom do you really want to take care? And so many specializations have come into play that really do you want to go after the whole set of things, but the specialization, look at it and go for that. So that's a very, very important aspect. As you focus on some of these things, we need to see how we can get challenged on some of the points. The second aspect is how do we really want to take care of the customer or the we call this a patient. Patient, I call this as a client or a customer. Really from a customer clinical perspective, if you're a hospital with a few set of doctors, the second aspect is between the clinician and the customer or the client, how do they really connect? And that's a very, very important aspect, because the clinical person has to be taken care, the customer has to, or the patient has to be taken, how do they really connect? And it's a very important aspect. Both sides, they have their own things, and both of them are very critical for us. And the third aspect is the most important aspect, patient care. And the patient care is a completely different scenario today. As we talk through some of those slides, you will see when the patient care changes and how from a in-house patient to out-house, really the clinical care, it goes back into the patient and you're going back into his house to take care of that. How much hospital can take care, how much the patient can take care, and various aspects of that. It's a completely different scenario, but interestingly, we've been pushed into it from a fellow professional who looks from the other side processes, etc. How the doctors are getting challenged, but it's there's change. Change is inevitable, and changes come up very, very quickly. So some of these things become very critical. So moving on from the patient, then there is this whole set of things we need to depend on: the supplier chain, the alliances, the technology, etc., which goes into some of this. So we call it as alliance partners. So the whole supplier chain or a vendor risk or whomsoever it is, who support all these systems. So they also come into play. So how do you really connect all of them and put into play? So some of these things, as we go through the value chain, it becomes very critical that all these things needs to be supported, and how do we really support it? So the second one is the typical end-to-end cycle of the right from the patient, inpatient, medical board, and the monitoring. And the third one is the back office. And back office we'll touch upon here and there. I just left it here for some of the slides because right from compliances to customer service to finance, accounting, the HR, payroll, and then the procurement. And some of these risks around some of that we will talk about in the future slides. But we will be talking more I will be talking more on the future of how this is looking like, not even the future, it's already current. Some of the way the practice is being changed, the medical profession has been changed thanks to this pandemic. We need to really think and think very quickly, and not even think very quickly, put that into action. There might be cost impacts. We'll talk about that as well. But then here it has come to stay. How do you really take care of your patient, and how do you use really technology to make a very major role? Go to the next slide, Sri. Just feel stop to me. Just if you have any questions, just let me know. This is one slide which is we've taken it up from our survey. How does the hospital look like? It's called the Hospital of the Future. And right from a survey we did between operations, technology executives, and technology is pure technology players, and then the physicians. The first one is how the operators, how do we really take care? So in the future, or not even the future, even in the current, do the hospitals really need to take care of only the serious cases? It can be a critical care, can be pandemic care or specialties, etc., etc. And that's become super critical right now because of this pandemic, all the current hospitals have run out of space, or they're having various challenges, whatever it happens. So it's very, very critical. How do we move some of this less critical things to outside or take it near the patient, or doing it to virtual ambulances or virtual thing. So it's become really important to do a virtual clinic or a virtual operation and a virtual thing, all that telemedicine which comes in play. Second one is the hospitals of the virtual capabilities, how much you can do of telemedicine, how much of clinical work you can do through videos, etc., which is again talked about. And third important one is a very new concept, which is the health hub concept. Health hub is really taking care of what the what the patient really cares for. It's not only the treatment, but the post-care treatment. And the post-care treatment can be emotional. It can be really from a perspective of well-being, all the things which happen post the cure it happens. So that's the third aspect. So virtually we're visualizing between this and how the whole treatment will change. And obviously it's here. We need to see how best we can transform it. A survey from the background on the left-hand side, if you see, how will they really take care? And AI is nothing but artificial intelligence, machine learning. You'll see more of blockchain, and you'll see more of augmented reality and virtual reality. I'll just talk about the topic somewhere down the line, but it's just a percentage. You will see how much percentage will be used for that, and there's a percentage of sensors, AI, AR. We are just talking about augmented reality and virtual reality, blockchain, and robotics and things. I'll just give you an example of augmented reality just in case people are not aware. If you're doing an operation, before an operation, how do you really stimulate some of these things? How do you really visualize certain things? And becomes a forecast for the simulation if the patient is going to react this way. So you're really using technology to really take it forward. Blockchain is another concept. Blockchain is a seamless ledger concept. It's a pull from accounting concept, where there's a single, if you see a concept of accounting, if you take a ledger entry pass from one book to another book, it's completely seamless. Similarly, blockchain is really going to happen in technology ways between, for example, the concept, I'll just have to draw some concept in the US, between the medical practitioner to the medical patient, to the national healthcare system, to whatever the treatment is. And blockchain is really getting into that space, right? You have the data of the patient, and value add concept comes into phase. Even there, the value for fee and value for service is going to be differentiated. And what blockchain really is going to do in the future is between the value for service and value for the fee. Value for service, as you deliver each doctor services, anesthetist comes and gives the medicine, and then there is clinicians and nurses, etc., etc. But as the patient transforms and the records get automated and documented, and every value chain as it gets added on, then he goes back to another patient. If he's got another treatment in add-on to this treatment, it is only the value add which is being added. And if it's going to be a problem in the next stage, they will go back to the previous treatment and have a question. And this is going to be a very interesting concept, and this can only happen through blockchain. So this technology will be virtual reality to really summarize the patient right from first stage of admission right to the medical cure, and goes forward. And you have the complete record, and then it gets sent to the healthcare provider, which is typical like an insurer. So it's an end-to-end game, which blockchain really will make it about. RP, or robotic process, obviously there are so much things which have come into play for sensors and how best you can take care of these professionals using this. And 3D printing and cloud, 3D printing is another concept where you have a visual image of various things, you can visualize it in 3D. And cloud computing, just a paraphrase, because most of the data is not going to be at the infrastructure. Obviously, it's a small clinic or a bigger hospital. So right now, they're not going to keep the infrastructure for themselves. They're taking all the data, putting it not on the computer, but the infrastructure on the cloud, which is again, it's infrastructure provided by somebody, but the data is yours, your security is yours, they're going to take care of that. So that's a very important concept of the next few years, but it's not even next few years, it's already there. I've seen some of the hospitals in Chennai also, or across India using some of that. It's very important, but blockchain and some of this AR, VR coming to play. Now coming to the right-hand side, new entrants who are going to say some of the healthcare industry, we just put down some, again, thing on that, whatever aspect of that. So how many of us are going to use some of this? You'll see some of these are not the clinicians or the patients. It is morely the people, the ecosystem around the healthcare system. So you have the payers, you have the tech vendors, then you have the companies who supply the drugs, then you have a clinician. So there's some percentage. So you will see data being shared between these various people, and it's called interoperable data, means all data will go up and down. Data is secure, but for the necessity of servicing correctly, you know the exact medical record. You don't need to have the physical record, goes into various places. You have the complete update of the patient, the medicine is taken, etc. Everything is linked, and that's how it looks like it is going to go. And it's not virtual reality, is actual actually, but the integration, etc. is very, very critical. Why I brought this up in this first phase itself is these are the, you can see it as a risk, or you see it as an opportunity, but it's here to come. Working from home and all these lockdowns today in Chennai, or lockdowns in whichever location you're in, it's going to be very critical that some of this integration happens and we are ready for it. As a practitioner, as a thing, I will be ready for some of the technologies to adapt some of it, how best we can use it. If you see the cost around it, it may not be huge at this point of time. It's just a question of saying, this is what I want, this is the treatment I like, this is what I've been connected with. All you need is a computer, some network, and some application. So go for it and take it from there. I'll just take you to the next slide. If you have any questions, let me know. Yeah, Shri, next. So we just put down something again, upside opportunities. 2020 has been a very interesting year. Tipping point here, as we call it, tipping point is we see both sides. So I put this in practitioner forms. One is epidemiology, and the last one is society, and second is the economy. Economy, I don't need to talk. Everybody knows what's the prediction, what's going to happen. Nobody knows the current, what's the future. But the first point is very critical. If there is upside opportunity, what happens to the medical healthcare and who is going to take care of the critical things? The downside risk is, first, the upside is whether improvement happens. And the downside is, yeah, they're predicting between now and 2022, a lot of things will happen. So how do you really visualize some of this? So are we ready for it? Are we thinking about in the right direction to get ready for some of these things? And the last thing is the whole society, because government is playing a very key role. Then there is so much technology which is helping, but on the downside, you have all sorts of interferences and all that stuff happening. But we have to keep this in mind, because part of the business we need to live with. But are we ready for some of the risk factors? How do we really handle some of that? So I just put the slide to get the perspective. There can be a plus side and a minus side. We need to be ready for that. Plus side comes, it's a benefit. But the downside is the careful about it, and we need to be ready for the worst of the situations. Worst of the situations is come, but then it can be an opportunity as well to improve how best we can get into this better. Well prepared, much better than what we are. Next slide. So we just get into the major topic. I'll try to give more examples here because it can be a slightly new topic for some of us. So what I will try to do is give some examples, and then have Srivatsan also talk about some of the things. Can you go ahead, Sri? Some of these things, what is risk management especially? So the point is, people see as risk is what we have to face every day. In colloquial language, we need to live with it. How do you overcome it, etc., etc. Simple common sense, yes, it is true. But the point is, if it comes and you're not prepared for it, that's where the problem starts. And what's happened now in the last 3 months, again, back to the old topic, how many of us were ready for it? How many of us were prepared for it? The downside of it, and this is the extreme downside, what has happened. Are we doing having something in place? So this brings to this important topic of risk management. And I'll correlate this to what I've done for healthcare, from a pharma company to hospital to or lab technicians to small clinics. It's very interesting when we started doing some work for the pharma company about 3-4 years ago. And we used to look at the dealer network. I'll just give you some examples here just to correlate, and how the dealers really dealt with the pharma company, how the dealers ran out of inventory, usage of the inventory past the due dates, etc., which was a major challenge. And when we threw up some of these points, the pharma company had to go back and fix all the dealers because there were a lot of reputation issues coming around and all that stuff. But really, from an overall perspective, how does the risk framework, we call it as risk framework, we'll just draw upon some of the topics. And then from an example of the hospital itself. Hospital is a very interesting case because pharma companies have some investment, they can prioritize R&D, etc. But from a hospital perspective or a typical practitioner perspective, we need to keep margins are pretty tight, and we need to be very careful on how much we can spend on some of these factors. But interestingly, as you grow up the chain and some of these risk management or your financial controls or your etc., regulatory compliance becomes very, very critical. As you grow up the chain, there you will be looking at investors looking at you. You will be looking at shareholders looking at you. You will be looking value chain from your own employees to retain employees from a various perspective. You will be looking at your own suppliers giving you medicines, and very, very importantly, your own patients. And your own patients come knowing the reputation of an X person or the doctor. Mainly, it's the doctor. We know that. But then obviously the infrastructure also will come into play. And interestingly, it will go back now. Infrastructure goes out, the doctor becomes more very important. But again, the support system which the doctor can have independently versus the hospital is a point of debate. So it's important that as we go up the chain, this whole sphere of risk management comes into play. So when we used to do work for some of these hospitals or continue to do work some of these hospitals, this has been a very debatable topic in most of my board meetings or the directors. How do you really present some of these key risk factors? It can be a doctor fees, it can be an inventory, it can be everyday reconciliations, collections, etc., etc. But it's a very, very open-ended topic. So we need to make sure the hospitals are taking good care. Back office, we showed the first slide from a strategy perspective, from an operation perspective, and from a financial perspective. And that's how this risk management is all about. So I'll just take you through some of the why it becomes very critical. From an integrated risk, it's not only the risk alone, it's an operation risk. It can be like a typical operations we do or a medical healthcare we do. From a financial risk perspective, are we really cash burst? Are you going to invest in something? Are we going to get the ROI in that? Then there is a technology risk, because always you're running out of updation on technology. How do you really take care of that? Then there is regulatory compliance, and regulatory compliance, especially in the sector, becomes very critical. So how do you take care of some of these things? And then there's the overall respect of reputation risk, which comes into play. So we really say the 4 or 5 pillars of risk management. These are very, very critical. So you can't take that in silos. We need to put them together, take an example, and go forward. So all the 4 or 5 pillars, we need to make sure it's in place. It's the pillar of the whole structure. Like a building you build, the pillars become very, very critical. So the first few pillars which lay is the what are the baseline for the whole building. So if the thing is not right, the whole building can collapse. So it's very important that you get the risk management on the thing in place. The second point is, why do you really need it? There are so many debates have happened. And when this pandemic happened, I've had several calls with some of my clients, including many healthcare clients. Are we guys ready for it? What happened in this case? Was an emergency? What happened? How do you really take care? And whenever we come under this topic from a perspective of outside inside view and inside outside view, we call that outside inside. So if I view a person from a doctor's perspective, how do they really handle it? From a doctor's view, from outside, how do they really handle this is another way. So how do you treat your patient or take care of your inventory levels, or your supplies are not getting out on time, etc., etc. And mainly getting the nurses onto the hospital, despite all the pandemics. Great job on the other side as well, because how they really transport. So it is a very complex situation, but if you have all the whatever, it's like a jigsaw puzzle. If you put all the puzzles together, you know how to solve it as well. So if you have something in place, you quickly maybe rationalize it or play Chinese checkers with that and quickly put that in place. So that's important from a business growth perspective. Losses, it's not really the losses you count in the risk management. It is the long-term view. It's not a short-term view. We don't do risk management just for a 3-month exercise or 6 months. It's there forever. Then you start updating. Now it's because of the crisis, and it's going to be there, right? So you need the extreme situations. When it will become normal, how do you really get back to normal? And the way it is looking, virtual reality has come into play, virtual treatment will come into play, and the way infrastructure is going to be treated today. And you'll see lots of buildings, real estate going haywire, and you will see more hospitals come into play, or maybe more healthcare, other maybe financial service come into play. And there's going to be very critical technology companies taking a backseat, and mostly financial service companies or maybe healthcare companies coming to play, take care of that. How do you really predict some of these losses? How can you take care in a worst of situation? So scenario planning comes into play. That's what we're talking about on slide number 3. And point number 4, capital adequacy, the financial risk around it. How do you really keep the cash flow going? And it's a very, very critical point. Cash flows become very tight. I know the situation, maybe I'm just to update, maybe April was a tough month for some of the medical. What I had been hearing was a very tough month. May was okay, and it'll be better in June. But it was so suddenly coming. Did we really focus some of these things? Yeah, there's an occupancy rate, there's a medical return rate, there is a gross margin, etc., etc. That's typical financial. But really speaking, the patients don't come, or patients have a specific treatment to do. If you've done away with the treatment and gone out for another treatment, you're really going to have a loss to patients. And what I heard yesterday, talking to the doctor yesterday, they had this very important comment he made. We have regular patients, Ravi, we took care of the regular patients. Others we could not accommodate. And that's a very important statement. Regular patients we need to take care and who are registered with us. And that was a very important statement. But unfortunately, new patients also might come and other doctors might refer. But unfortunately, he couldn't take care. And how do you really, do you have a tie-up with other hospitals, or you going to build your brand around it, etc.? Very important to take care of that. And the 5th point is the culture. I'll talk about a bit on the culture side. Right from I've seen doctors talking to me on the financial side, on the risk management. It's very interesting. Some of the doctors really know, really high end. They really appreciate your process control because you run the clinic or operation. So you know end to end what's happening for your admission, what's happening your revenue, what's happening your collections, what's the payroll cost, everything you know. But the important aspect, do all the people around you appreciate correct records have to be maintained, reports have to be given on time. If you have a challenge, they come back to you. And that's what we call this culture, right from the bottommost person to the top person, the process around it, and really, does it really report correctly? So that's important to have the right culture in place. So it's called the risk culture or whatever we can call it, but the tone at the top, we call it as tone at the top. All the doctors or the person running the hospital or the promoter or the company which owns some of these hospitals have the right tone, and reporting becomes the hallmark. And last one is on the improve the important aspect of what do you really look at it from this perspective of value chain. Value chain, I just mentioned about value for service and value for growth. And one of the points which is always coming up is how do you really add value instead of pushing the same treatment, and how do you really automate some of this? And so the patient experience improves, and then less waiting time happens. So these aspects come into play. And why I mentioned about each of this is how critical risk management is viewed in today's scenario. Yes, Sri, next slide. Some of the aspects of risk management, just put it in a regulatory side. So just a Companies Act, I just put 1 or 2 points here, but you'll see a lot of these. This is more mainly from a corporate perspective. So, but even from a corporate perspective, a lot of requests are coming. I'm hearing doctors and all these things are being tied up because the government is really looking for more help from the doctors and how best they can use the infrastructure. And so critical becomes, how do you really have a corporate in place? Maybe you have a private limited or whatever it is, but some of these nuances of Companies Act, some of this NABH comes into play, and all these regulations which come into play. I just put that point here. From a governance perspective, you have three tiers: a risk management committee, you have an audit committee, you have a board committee, and then you have the final shareholders. So if it's a typical listed company, you have that set up. If you have a very private limited, you might have an audit committee and a board. But if it's a full listed, unlisted, or a corporate private holder, shareholder ownership, you might just have the promoter. But all these aspects, if you have something in place to go on, you'll have a steering committee or a management committee to help you out, which involves all the process owners or your key stakeholders like your finance, you can have your operations, and then your main thing, your key doctors also in place so that you get a consultative approach in place. So this, from a regulatory perspective, quite a few regulations come into play. From a clinical perspective, I just mentioned that. From a financial perspective, just to put that in place. Next week. This is what we call this the diamond triangle. We call this diamond triangle because if you see, it's the cornerstone of any risk thing. So there are about 9 sub-processes if you count 1, 2, 3. And then how the governance, I just talked about tone at the top. You see the left-hand side, which is typical tone at the top, from expectation, shareholder expectation. And then the common concept is the risk appetite. I'll just 2 minutes take on the risk appetite, what it is. It is question of saying, okay, this is all the risk thing. If you see the right hand side, I've just put down something in writing. These are my risks, which my thing in place. So I have, say it's a single doctor or 4 doctors I have 10 nurses, I have this infrastructure in place. This is what the risk I can take. This is downfall risk. If a patient comes in, I have to refuse. It's a risk by itself. If I have an investment to make, my cash doesn't come back. There's a risk that the ROI does not come. If I get a full blown operation place, how much the regulations really come into play. It's a small operation we can manage, but when you do all these things, right from a Factories Act or a shop and establishment, right to all those Companies Acts that come into place. So plus minus plus is, yes, you run the operation. The downside is you need to take care of compliance. So what is the risk you can really take from a perspective? How much you can absorb it and how much you can leave it on the table. So this is what we call it as risk appetite, or how much you can digest in typical times, how much you can't. So we call that in risk parlance as risk appetite. So how much the organization really can take it. And that's very, very critical perspective. Okay, these are risks I can live with. These are the risks I cannot live with. And these are the risks I can avoid. So it's not risk you need not take, you can take, but knowingly saying, okay, when it comes, we have some capability in place to live with it. We have some several measures to take care of that. But then a risk, without risk, business cannot run, so you need to take it. But how much of really can you push your level? Can I build 3 hospitals and say, okay, this is my capital intensive? It's a very capital intensive place. So obviously there is investment going to real estate, going into buildings, and going into your machinery, into your equipment, etc. And then you have to take care of all that. And despite that, you get best of situations or worst of situations. You don't get the patients in place, you will have challenges. And the main thing is the doctors themselves. Doctors are in big demand today, and so are the nurses. So how do you really take all that in place, live with it, and take it forward? So that's very important. The second chain is the executive management. We just mentioned about that. We'll talk about some of the slides and the next few things. How do you report it? How do you pick up the risk? There's a methodology on which we do it. And then how do you really monitor? The last one is the critical, the execution of that. How do you really monitor that risk response? How do you think from a perspective of on the table? So risk is consists of 2 aspects, which is one is the controllable aspect and the uncontrollable aspect. Then there is the impact aspect and the expectation aspect. So risk is really, okay, there is an expectation, it might happen, but the impact is nothing. So the risk is, okay, nothing. But the real situation now, which has happened, expectation was, yes, high, but the impact was nothing at all. So it's a 0 situation. but expectation was 0 and impact was high, how do you really determine it? But really, unfortunately, between the expectation, impact, we know previous trends, we have it. But in the current situation, again, I have to get back to the current situation. Was there any expectation at all? It was expected maybe 6 months ago, but nobody knew the impact. And this impact has been so huge. Really, from a risk management, how do you really categorize some of this? How do you really take some of this into play? How do you really start executing some of that? So in the next few slides, so just leave that on the right-hand side. I just talked about it, operation risk, typical operations, HR risk is one of the major things. How do you take care of the situation, the work persons, the clinicians, or the nurses, etc. Third one is the legal risk. Just gave an example there. Financial risk, right from your capital to your payments to your thing. How do you really take care of that? And then the strategic risk, we just talked about it. How much really you want to do? How much you want to grow? Do you want to grow into a bigger size, or you want a more service oriented? So which will be very service oriented in the future. It will be very service oriented. That's what we're predicting. And then the last one is the technology, and that's going to be very, very critical. The technology side, there's going to be a lot of investment coming into a lot of these equipments, medicines, out of this blockchains, etc. So the last one is going to be very, very significant in the future. Maybe infrastructure costs might go down, but then the last one is going to be critical. The infrastructure still has to stay for critical care and all that stuff. So it's going to be interesting how we're going to balance both of them, but the patient care is always at your front. Next slide. So some of the hot topics, I just leave it for the time being. Some of the things we just had a discussion. Maybe risk sensing, I just put that there. There is tools available. So I just mentioned about some of the tools in the last few slides. There are some tools which are available. How do you risk sense it? How do you categorize it? Typical scenario planning. How do you predict it? And cyber risk is another technology related. So how much of data is being secure, how much patient records will come into play, even though there might be sharing of patient records in the future with various people to make sure the records are updated, etc. That's very critical. And then the last one, based on the strategic risk and risk governance, how many you really can allocate resources to ensure your risk thing. It's not a part-time job. It's mainly it's a individual, it's not a siloed approach. It's a group of people who decide right from your board of members right to your bottom people who operate on the hospital floor and then the back office. It's a joint effort. The risk needs to be spread around them. So it's an ownership jointly, and then finally reporting to a risk officer. Next one, please. So you want to take it from here?
Sure, Mr. So now we already spoke about the risk management framework and how we have to analyze and how we have to monitor the risk. So once we have done all these activities, then we have to have a proper risk and controls tracker. So this is one where after identifying all the risk profile, we need to have a structured way in which all the risk has to be tracked. So this is a template where many organizations use it, where they identify who's the risk owner and what is the risk category. Earlier we looked on multiple categories, either it is strategic, financial, operational. Then what is the root cause of the risk and what is the action plan? It is not that we should know the risk and then we should be silent. So what is the action plan to effectively mitigate the risk? That is something which we need to track it, and there is also be a risk rating to be assigned to each risk. So this is a illustrative template which people are using to ensure that the risk per se is tracked and it is actioned with a target owner and date. It is not that everything should be going to a risk team. There has to be each individual owner. Say any risk in the operational department, it has to go to the operational team who will be responsible for the operational related risk to be monitored.
So you can explain each of the slides, one of the points, example.
Yes. Next is the way how we categorize the risk, how we also explain on the way once the risk is identified, how are we going to use the dashboard to use the risk. Say for example, now we have a operational related risk, where the risk associated with the adequate infrastructure to support the patient service or patient satisfaction. So when you identify all the risk associated with a patient service, we need to capture the risk and we need to say how are we going to monitor the risk and what is the mitigation factor in place. That is something which we need to identify. And the likelihood and impact. The likelihood is something which talks about what is the possibility that the risk is going to occur. And the impact is what impact. So what is the turnaround time I have to address this risk? Okay, now we had a business continuity planning risk due to this pandemic outbreak. What is the time many organizations took to get back into normal? So in some of the survey, what we did, almost 60% of companies have taken 10 days to respond, but balance 40% of companies have taken more than 20 days. So that is the impact which all the risk has on enterprises as a whole. So for all these things, the risk management per se is becoming very critical, where the management and board should develop a risk philosophy which explains how the risk is being valued in the organization and how it is being treated, so that it ensures that the management is aware of all the risk and there is no surprise in the future. There are illustrative tools which are available, where there are risk dashboard where many companies are having, because everything is in paper will not be easy to track. People at a senior doctor level or people at a CXO's level need a illustrative dashboard saying, okay, what are all my key risks, whether it is being addressed or not. So there are dashboards which are being populated for the CXO's level, so that they can have a synopsis or snapshot of how the risk is being monitored also. The risk monitoring is one of the very key activity in the risk management process.
Yeah, just 2 minutes, Sri. Yeah. Yeah, just from a category perspective, just on the right-hand side on the dashboard, if you see the dashboard, it has the what I called as risk appetite, all the risks. We just put a sample here. If you see information technology, for example, is related to information cybersecurity. There's a risk owner identified. It might be an IT head or whoever. The impact and likelihood are the scores. Now, how do we really go about this exercises? We do a lot of walkthroughs with the process owners, come back with their wish list of risk. And wish list, we don't take it as such. We have to gather all the information around it and then substantiate some of the risks with real impact. So if there's a X risk, for example, I'll just talk about technology. If a cybersecurity attack has happened in the company. Now we walk through this exercise. What was their IT policy? Did they have that process in place when the attack happened? What is the mitigation plan they took? How did they recover the data or recover from the situation? How fast did they respond to the attack, and how fast did they mitigate all that? So all this exercise we go through. As part of a wish list, we write all the risks there. They didn't have a firewall, they did a malware attack, they didn't have the latest virus update. These are risks you foresee. But from a perspective of impact, if they had an attack and all that, and repeatedly categorize the impact as high. So the scoring goes from 1, the lowest, to the 5, the highest, or whatever it is. And then multiply with the factor of likelihood, which has happened 1 to 4 or 5. So you multiply both of these factors, you get into the risk, high risk score. So you rightly see 4 into 4, it's one of the highest dashboard. It's a 2 cross 2 dashboard, low, high, high, low, high, high, which is, I will just, maybe if there's a risk dashboard, I can see. If you see the right-hand side, all the arrows going to the top means it's all on the higher category. You see the financial management coming to 5 and 6 in the middle category, and the lower end is. So what we have really done is gathered all the information. You see, there's only one low from an R&D perspective, how much is being included. So based data gathered, there's a based on impact taken, visualized, and taken forward. Now, typical hospital or healthcare situation, we will see risk, typical risk from a revenue perspective. So revenue leakages, how much is cash collections happening, how much is cash collections really reconciled with the books, and how much of medicine is being sold to your pharmacy, all that stuff. So really from a risk, high risk perspective, some of the healthcare providers can be categorized with revenue can be a big risk. From medicines can be a big risk from an inventory perspective. Doctors, again, fees, etc. It's always a challenge. What's happening? Do they have good contracts in place? How do they really pay for it? Financial side, always the reporting. Once the financial inventory and things are tied up, less of a problem. But now the current scenario is vendor risk. How does the vendors really supply in the current situation? with your pharma manufacturers take care of that. They will take care from a value chain perspective. They supply medicine for time. So as you go down the line, really you're pushing the risk to such an extent scenario. You need to take care of, when I pushed in the previous slide, all the 6 aspects: financial, operational, regulatory, regulation. How do they comply with it? You have a 31st March year end and you have to report results by June. Most clients could not take care of it because the audit became an issue, remote audit became an issue. I know most of the companies who had to report in May started only reporting in June. Even now, June reporting has happened in July. So these are various things. The risk management has pushed most of these parameters right from, if you see a speedometer from a 0 to a 150 or 180, the risk has gone from a low or very low to a very high level. So some of the situations which happen currently, maybe not the current representative, but it has happened. So how do you really visualize going back? How do you really predict some of this, project some of this into the future? How do we take care of that? And that's becoming very critical. This dashboard become very critical. Not a one-time exercise. We need to keep updating from time to time. Once it is, we call it as a framework. We call that as a risk framework. Put all the risks in place. Put a scoring initially. Come back to the risk charter. Then we have a mitigation plan in place. The important thing, the owner, okay, risk owner says, okay, these are my risks, I can live with it. These are my risks, I cannot live with it. How do you really treat it? Because every risk has a cost element to it. You can't implement a measure or a process for some of this. You need to be careful about it. So this is a very summary slide from a risk perspective. So I thought maybe I should start explaining a bit on that. Yes, Sri, next, please. Some of the things, we just again a survey, interesting. There is 4 or 5 results out here. If I start reading from the left hand side, is what it is today and what is 3 years. Top priority risk, how a CFO sees or a risk leader sees. One of the first one is the consumer engagement. It has gone from 56 to 60%. Cyber security is always on the higher side, which is 64 3 years from now. Transferred in value-based care. Now, value-based care is what I mentioned. It's no more service-based. It is going to be value-based. So if it's coming from a real value, if you're a doctor with a specialization, you will come into play only when the specialization comes, and then the hospital takes care. Then you'll be charging only for a different. The whole thing is because of the specialization, and you have a treatment, the cost might be higher, so it might be value-based. And from a technology transformation, it's the highest now because the scoring which has happened, a lot of technologies come into play. I talked about blockchain, artificial intelligence, all that comes in. From a compliance regulatory, always on a higher side because regulations keep changing. The COVID regulations, very difficult proposition. When I saw regulation, very difficult to comply with that. And then from a capital perspective, access to capital is very critical. Again, healthcare has been given a lot of importance under the current situation, but it's very important to how to get the right capital into place. Because yes, if you are a startup or you have a thing for 2-3 years, how do you have the right financials in place? How do you have a due diligence in place? Right investors coming to place. But capital will be very, very critical also because of the investment which might go into some of the technologies. Coming to the right-hand side, so the majority of surveys, how do you address some of this? One of them is get the staff, right staff in place, and training of them, some of them becomes very critical. Then from a defense perspective, how do you, this is called lines of defense. In a typical regulatory or risk perspective, there are 3 lines of defense. First line of defense is the typical clinician or the nurse who takes care of the process every day. They count the inventory in the month, they end, they count the inventory, update the inventory and put it in place. So that's the first line. The second line is the typical internal person or the supervisor or the person who checks on a sample basis the inventory is in place, etc. This becomes a more checker perspective, or from a risk perspective is it in place. Third is the typical auditor in place, or internal auditor or your statutory auditor, and typical who counts it. So 3 lines of defense become very critical. So there's going to be some importance given to that. And these are top things we've called out. There might be many other controls in place, but these are some of the things which are called out. Obviously, leadership becomes very critical. And third parties is the vendors management you're doing and how do you really deal with it. And then from a data analytics perspective, how do you really analyze data? Just to mention about data, that becomes very, very critical under specific. So all the data which you're gathering from various records, how do you really analyze some of them and keep that in place? So it's a very important aspect. How do you really get that? The bottom side is the CFOs, they are prepared for priority risk. You see from a blue, very prepared, from a moderately less blue, and then nothing at all from the green side. So actually, it's green is not the regular one, it's actually the red one, but we colored it that way. So for compliance, they are saying they're okay, transitioning less of okay, consumer management and all that stuff. But you see most of them, they say they are generally very prepared, but I'm not sure about this survey because most of them I know from a compliance, do they really have the right systems in place to record or report, etc. The challenge. Value-based care is very critical now. How do you really transition typical hospital sort of environment to a patient sort of close to patient sort of situation? Consumer engagement, constantly monitoring them through various means. Now iPhones have become very critical. You can have a chat or through the WhatsApp or through a chat box, you can communicate. Now transformation through technology, etc., also has become critical. Again, most of them are saying they're well prepared. I'm not sure about this is applicable to India because this was a US. That's how it looks on that board. The fifth one is the risk management. How do you really allocate some of them? How do you really manage some of them? This is again a skilled approach, etc. So last bottom is very critical. 20% are saying they're not really speaking. But what my personal experience, some of the risk management has not really enrolled, but now of late we are seeing because of the situations which have changed in the last 6 months to 12 months, it has really taken importance. And how do you really budget some of this? And budgeting, because it has a cost element, it has a process element, but once you put the framework in place, it's important to follow through and make use of them. And also business have gone, continue to grow in the next 3 years. Yes, there will be top 3 risks, which we just called out from a technology or a new risk coming into play. All those things, how do you really manage it? And how do you really budget some of them? That's one of the services. So, but this is just a forecast on the future, but this is based on studies we've done. So this is one important slide to look at from a readiness perspective, from a how do we take it forward? Go ahead, Sri.
So in this section, we will be discussing on what is a risk at a process level, what differentiates a fraud from a risk, and how control should be designed to mitigate a risk and fraud. There are examples alongside these topics so that we can relate it with healthcare related risk. And there are also slides explaining the significance of risk and control documentation and also the accelerated impact of COVID on future of health, which Mr. Ravi was talking in earlier slides. So now in this slide, we are just explaining on what is a risk and some of the illustrative example. So going by a typical definition, it just says potential for loss or harm which can be created. But in simple terms, risk is defined as a possibility that an event will occur which will have an impact on organization achievement of its objectives. We all would have seen examples of companies making money by taking intelligent risk and also lose money by failing to manage risk intelligently. So there are both sides to a risk. So what it shows is the risk has both upside and also a downside. An upside is called a rewarded risk. It creates shareholder value, which means increase in revenue, profit, and also savings in cost. The downside is called as an unrewarded risk, where it helps in preserving shareholders' value. Like it helps in reducing the penalties, it helps in reducing the fraud, and it also helps in reducing the lawsuit. So based on the nature of impact of risk, it can be broadly classified into 3. One is a financial risk, operational risk, and compliance risk. The financial risk is something where it have an impact in which the money is being managed and profitability is achieved in a hospital. When it comes to operational related risk in healthcare, it is the risk associated and it is having an impact on day-to-day activities or process in a healthcare organization. And when it comes to compliance, it is a risk that lead to non-compliance of any policies, procedures, and regulations of laws. Now, in our right-hand side, we have given a typical examples of risk that is applicable to a healthcare sector. So take an example of revenue and operations. So you have a risk of non-registration of patients, where a patient come in, but you provide a service, but you don't have a record to show that this patient was served by a particular hospital or a clinic. But whereas we need to have a medical record as per NABH, we are supposed to maintain the medical records of patients. Similarly, a registration fees, where the registration fees has to be collected from the patient, but due to the lack of control in my front office, sometimes the registration fee is collected and passed on, sometimes the registration fee is not collected at all. Similarly, there are cases where you have an incorrect recovery of treatment charges, where due to a lack of clarity, sometimes instead of charging for a category of service, we end up in charging B category of service. It has both possibilities, where you end up charging the patient more, where a patient comes back and then asks and then we correct it. But it goes for a patient dissatisfaction. In another side, you charge less to the patient, which results in a shortage of revenue to the hospital. Then you have issues around waiver of patient fees. So who has authority to waive a patient fees? That is the reason we have also talking about an absence of clearly defined delegation of authority. Because the healthcare industry or the hospital per se is very big, where there are multiple operations. You have an inpatient, you have an outpatient, you have an operation, you have ICU, pharmacy. So there are multiple decisions happening in all these activities, whether I should collect a registration fees, whether I have to charge him, whether I have to give him a discount, whether a fees has to be waived. So who all are authorized to take these decisions? So the delegation of authority document becomes very critical for this. And finally, from a hospital point of view, the revenue recognition, whether my revenue is overstated or understated, it has to be accurately stated is a key factor here. So how do I treat it? Say you have an unearned or unbilled revenue. A patient gets admitted into my hospital and I have started providing him service. So what should I account a revenue as? So should I have to wait till the patient gets discharged? What is my revenue recognition policy? Is there a clearly defined policy? That becomes a key. Similarly, when we go to inventory, there are more risks what we have seen due to absence of segregation of duty. The same person will be responsible to even receive the medicines, and he will be responsible to issue also. As an industry per se, we don't frisk the people inside the hospitals when they go out. So there are possibilities where a medicines or tablets can be taken out of the hospital and it can never go unnoticed, because the inventory adjustments is something which is very familiar and an activity which is happening as usual regularly in this organization. So there has to be more control around inventory management. Similarly, when we come to talk about procurements, so procurement also has a fraud angle to it. So we should have a clear policy to ensure that only right vendors are selected, and the pricing mechanism, because the pricing mechanism is very key, because sometimes due to the hospital structure, we get it directly from the wholesaler, or we have to go to the distributor or dealer who the wholesaler advise. How is our pricing mechanism done? Is it aligned with the manufacturer? Are the discounts adequately taken? Because in many cases, the discounts what has to be taken or will not be availed by the hospital due to unawareness. And similarly, the approval mechanism for purchase orders. So the function typically goes like this. There is a purchase team, there is an operation team. Always there will be an expectation that there has to be a excessive inventory to meet any requirement. But it is also having a negative slide where it is having an impact on my working capital. So it is necessary that we need to identify what is the right level of stock. In case of absence of determination of what is the right level of stock, we might end up buying excess purchases. And there are cases of excess payment or duplicate payment to vendors, because we always, majority of buying or just-in-time buyings, or we end up buying a same item multiple times during the week or month. So there will be multiple invoice for a same vendor coming inside. How am I addressing this risk? And how am I ensuring that the material or medicines are actually delivered? So that there has to be a control with adequate segregation of duty, where it should say that there is a person or an independent security personnel who has verified the medicine or materials which has come inside my hospital, and it is being accounted in my ERP system also. Wherever we have a ERP system, there has to be a track of inventory inwarding and inventory consumption. Wherever we don't have an adequate ERP system, there has to be a register which tracks what has been received, to whom it has been issued, and what is the final stock in my hand. So the inventory count becomes a very key factor for both these things. So the inventory count should always be a surprise count. It should not be a regular cycle count, where many hospitals follow a cycle count to adjust inventory. But in addition to that, there has to be a surprise count to identify, is there any anomaly happening in this process? That is something which is very key. And when it comes to information technology, so till now we spoke about the physical risk in the process. So when it comes to IT related risk, still there are possible where a person who need not have access to a particular domain in my system are given access. Take for an example, a purchase guy given access to a medical record domain, which he need not have, because there are possibilities that he can go and change the medical record or delete the medical record by mistake. So there has to be a proper segregation of duty. Similarly, backup and disaster management plan has to be effective. The amount of data what we have, and even going by the NABH requirement, the data has to be preserved. Many hospitals have started having the data in a digital form. If I don't have a proper backup or disaster recovery plan, then there could be a regulatory implication also where we might not have adequate data and backup. Similarly, a change management and password management. Sharing of password is something which is very common in this industry. How am I addressing it? There has to be a regular control which says that the password has to be modified or password has to be changed in every 30 days. Finally, the cyber security framework becomes very key, because the data what we are having the patient records. So there are cyber attacks which are happening to take away the records from the hospital. So that there has to be a proper cyber security framework available in the hospital. Vulnerability assessment and penetration testing is something which needs to be done to ensure that there are adequate safeguard from an information technology point of view. Coming to fixed assets, the amount of asset what we handle, either it is a medical equipments or the beds or the furnitures or the systems what we have, this has to be properly tracked. What we see is currently this process, the tagging is something which is not available in at least 40% of the hospitals which we have seen. So what we are also seeing is the growing need for a RFID based tracking, where once you get an asset, you have to tag it using a RFID, where it says that wherever there is a movement of any hospital related equipment, this gets easily monitored, so that we ensure that the asset of hospital is within the hospital premises and we are tracking. Coming to compliance, we have multiple departments functioning inside the hospital. So there has to be a framework. It is not that I get a declaration from HR, I get a declaration from finance, I get a declaration from operations saying that whatever is being required has to be complied. Instead, it has to be from the top, where we have a framework and we have to say that these are all the laws which is applicable to you and you have to follow. You have to file so-and-so returns, and we need to get a declaration from this. In absence of such framework, we might have a surprises tomorrow by saying, okay, you have not followed up, you have not followed with a particular compliance requirement, where you have not filed the returns or remittance on time. Because presently it is left at an individual level, given the decentralized system in which many of hospitals are functioning. And even the proof of compliance, because what we see is the compliance is something where whatever we have seen, the proof of compliance is being with the individual system per se. There has to be a proper method of archiving all the evidence. Say HR department has remitted the PF or ESI. How am I collecting all those PF and ESI challans, and how am I recording it, or how am I storing it for easy retrievability? That is something which is critical from compliance. And when it comes to payroll, how am I ensuring that the salary which is paid, there is no excess salary paid to any employees? We should have adequate mechanism to track the attendance of employees and overtime payment. So whether the overtime which is incurred is as per the requirement. There has to be a proper approval mechanism. And how am I tracking the leave of all the nurses? Because they might not have access to the system where they go and apply leave, or where they go and apply for the actual overtime they have worked. Still, this process is manual in some of the hospitals. Few hospitals have moved up to automation. Wherever it is manual, the importance to comply with this control is on the process owners. So these are some of the typical risk what the hospital per se is facing from a domain perspective. Then let's go on to fraud. So we have discussed what is risk. So now what is a fraud? A fraud refers to an intentional act and it is caused by an employee or organization for a personal gain. Basically, in other words, it is a deceiving activity to gain advantage from or an illegal profit. So what it says is this illegal act or benefit, what it says is it harms the personal or party involved. Say, take an example in healthcare. An employee pockets the pharmacy cash from the company register. So the employee has got the cash, but in case of hospital, he has lost the hospital has lost the cash. So what should be the control in this case? There has to be a proper segregation of duty, and there has to be a proper cutoff procedure, and there has to be a proper surprise verification. Take a shift which happens from morning 6 o'clock to afternoon 2 o'clock. There has to be a surprise verification in between where the people from a cross-functional team to come and check what is the pharmacy collection, whether it is tallying up with my cash register. And whenever a shift ends, there has to be adequate handover procedure. And wherever we have a ERP system, we should ensure that all pharmacy sales are properly documented in the ERP system. And wherever we have a manual receipting system, where we have a manual bill book, the control around manual bill book has to be properly reviewed and it has to be put in place. It has to be continuously serial numbered, where if I issue a book, the book number should have 1 to 100, and at the close of book, there has to be a proper explanation to say whether all the receipt has been used for patient billing or was there any cancellation, and whether I have whatever was collected is properly handed to the books. This is something which we need to explain. So now we go into why a fraud happens. That is the reason we have put a fraud triangle. This fraud triangle is used to explain the motivation behind the fraud. A fraud occurs because of three things. One, there is a pressure, and there is an attitude, and there is an opportunity to create a fraud. So the control becomes important to reduce the incidence of fraud, and this control should be based on an end-to-end fraud assessment. So how do I do a fraud assessment? You need to identify the indicators of fraud, and you should identify what are all the fraud schemes possible in my sector. That is the reason we have called out illustrative fraud schemes applicable to a healthcare sector. Wrong code provided during a billing. Say this can have an impact on my insurance, where I have provided X service, but while billing to an insurance, I have given a wrong service. Here, there is a possibility where I am applying for an excess discount from the insurance company. Take for an example where an employee-related fraud, ambulance charge fraud, which happens in majority of the hospital. How do I ensure that the ambulance fraud doesn't happen? So who are all my parties where I'm getting tie-up? What has to be played? So there has to be a clear guidance to say that how much I should pay to an ambulance person, and how do I ensure that there are patients which have been brought to my hospital in that ambulance, and the payment to the ambulance person has been paid as per the approved delegation of authority. Similarly, there are also a risk where I billing for a brand name or highly priced drugs, where I bill it for a highly priced drug, but in fact I sell a drug which is not of the same price. Then a patient comes back and identify that no, what is given is different from what is being billed in my invoice. Then we go and correct it, but it results in patient dissatisfaction. These are some of the fraud risk what we have called out in the healthcare sector. For all these things, both risk and fraud, what is critical is the management control, which is what we are talking in our next slide. So what is a control? Any process that mitigate a risk is called as a control. So this has to be based on a COSO framework. So COSO is nothing but a committee of sponsoring organization of the Treadway Commission, which explains that internal control as a process affected by an entity's board of director, management, and other person to give a reasonable assurance to ensure that business objectives are met. So the objective of control here from a business point of view should be to ensure adequate and effectiveness of transaction, and reliability of financial information, and compliance with laws and regulation. Whenever you are implementing a control, there are three factors what you should consider. What is my implementation platform for a control, whether it is automated or manual. If it is more automated, it is good for the organization because all automated controls are more preventive in nature rather than detective. So preventive control ensures that there are no false being happening. Wherever it is manual or detective, you need to have a person who goes and reviews it. Then what is the nature of control? Either it is an entity level control, or it is a process level control, or IT related controls. That is something which needs to be considered whenever we are defining the control. Again, we have given some of the examples. Take an example of overstatement or understatement of revenue. So this is a risk. So what control should be there is, we should have a proper billing system which has an access to only authorized person, and there should also be a periodical reconciliation happening to ensure that my revenue is correct. If you take probably the misappropriation of cash, which is a fraud related risk, where earlier we spoke about there has to be a proper segregation of duty and there has to be a surprise verification has to be performed. Similarly, how am I going to address my risk of expired medicine to patient? There has to be a periodical review of pharmacy stock to ensure that all expired medicines are being properly identified and removed from the shelf, so that we don't issue any expired medicine to a patient. This can be done with the help of physical verification and also during a surprise verification. So followed with the risk, fraud and control. So since we know a fraud, we know a risk, and we also know what a control is. So what is important is we should have a risk documentation. The risk documentation is also referred as a risk and control matrix. So we have just put an illustrative risk and control matrix documentation for your perusal, which is also being followed by industry. So this risk and control matrix is a powerful tool which helps an organization to identify, rank, and implement control measures to mitigate all the risk which we spoke in our earlier slide. So why do we need a risk documentation? Is there a regulatory angle? Yes, there is a regulatory angle also. So as per Companies Act, Section 34, the Board of Directors has to ensure that there are adequate internal financial controls within the organization. Wherever it is a corporate, this is applicable. We call it as an internal financial control framework. And how it will help us, this RCM will help to identify and highlight the gaps that poses threats to an organization that may not be previously considered at all. You need to have an end-to-end review, as Mr. Ravi explained in earlier slide. You need to have a discussion, walkthrough, and then assess, and then come to a documentation by saying, what are all the risks applicable to me, and what is the control objective? Take for an example of first case. We are talking about the process of invoice and payment, and within invoice and payment, we are talking about invoice processing. So what is a risk in invoice processing? Delay in recording invoice in ERP. The objective of this control is to say that the invoice are recorded on a timely basis. So we should have a control description to say what is the existing control description. It should be mapped to a control owner. So all risk and control has to be mapped to a control owner to ensure that the control is being effectively followed. And we should also have a frequency of a control. The frequency of a control is important to ensure that how are we going to take a sample to test whether the control is effective or ineffective in our test of operating effectiveness. And classify the control into operational control, or it is a strategic control, financial control. Finally, whether it is a manual control or automated control. Wherever it is a manual control, the review mechanism has to be more strict around the control. Wherever it is an automated control, we should ensure that the system ensures that all these controls are operating effectively. So what the benefit I get because of maintaining this document is, it provides more clarity to the control owner regarding the importance of control and what happens if it is not done. Because from a CFO point of view, he can understand what is the risk of non-recording invoice in time. But from an AP executive point of view, he might not understand that. So this document gives a clarity to the control owner, and it also indicates that there is adequate segregation of duties, and it also gives a confidence to the senior management that the controls are in place. In addition to that, it also gives an assurance to the statutory auditors on the control environment in which the organization is operating, and the financial statement is accurate. Then we are getting into a acceleration impact of COVID on future health trend. Mr. Ravi, you want to take it up? Sir, you are on mute.
Thanks, Sri. So I think we went into a very hello. We
Yeah, we are able to hear you.
went into a detailed description, but again, I've come back to the future, how COVID has impacted some of this. And you see the green and red arrows, and then very importantly, how this is impacting. If you see, the first point is on the data sharing. That's one of the points we've been talking about. So right from a consumer or a patient, as you take the data, how best it is really getting driven right across board, and how data from one hospital shared with another or a clinic right back to the doctor. He can see it on his iPhone. The patient can see his data, and that's very, very critical because the patient healthcare record, that's very fundamental assumption, is the data is digital form, and the data is being shared with various stakeholders so that they are up to date. And important aspect is the patient owns the data. This is a very new concept, but again, as you go down the digital chain and you get more of this data on linkages with various things, including your clinics and including your patient records. And then obviously regulators will be looking at it. Obviously, in the current situation, so much of regulation has happened manually, especially in the COVID situation. That's why you're seeing a lot of these, unfortunately, misreporting, underreporting, or whatever it is. It's important to understand how much data becomes very critical and how much the patient becomes very, very central point. And also take data back to the patient and how we really important. So, and the next aspect is the architecture. This is slightly on the architecture, the technology side, and how much the platform is going to be. So really speaking, do you need the infrastructure to do it? No, there are applicable platforms available. There is, you can host the data on cloud. So these data have engines which can analyze the data, how often the patient has come on record, how often this illness has happened to him, and you can analyze it very well. And how best you can give a treatment first free, or second, third or time he comes back, how best you can do it. And this is all on the iPhone of the doctor or iPhone of the record keeper or the hospital, etc. It's so important that data architecture is well formed. The most important third aspect is the tougher aspect. We put the red arrow down. Uh, it is not always in our control. There is obviously various states, various geography rules come into play, various regulations which come into play. And this is one of the most challenging aspects. This is, some of them are government funded. This is not only typical of India. Globally also, there is funding, non-funding, insurance comes into play. This is the most uncontrollable fact, but unfortunately, whole of this access to various resources, etc., is given. This has put a lot of strain on the system because of various availability or non-availability of infrastructure availability. So, but then the various regulations also not helping us. So it's very important to be correlated to it. How best we can retrieve or cache or whatever it is out in the system, how best we can recover it. So this is down a red arrow because this is not in our control, obviously, but then we need to take care because we can be cash out because of wrong insurance claims, etc., etc. And then the fourth one is the convenience, which I just talked about, the data sharing and the consumer. The consumer is the patient, always on top. They are very, very critical from a perspective of how best convenience can happen, how best they can be in treatment, offline, online, whatever it is. And then the last 4 or 5 fifth point is again various aspects on they see the remote care sensors, the take care of their home treatment, the videos put at home, and how much of technology really helps treating the patient really sitting remotely. And this is a very big change which is coming in. So all these new technologies which can take you directly into the house of the patient, you can monitor the patient right sitting wherever you are, and this is going to be a big change coming. It's already there in some of the hospitals, I believe, but then some of the patients also are going to take care because it's thanks to all the various challenges, you cannot take the ill patients outside, elder patients not coming to the hospital. This is going to be a big change. And last one is all those technologies which is in place, all this newest clinical, this is more clinical side, how the breakthroughs are happening, so we need to be updated on that. So some of this is reflected in how COVID-19 or whatever that pandemic has really helped us or pushed us to a corner, but it's here to stay. So we need to adapt to that situation. We need to see what are the technology available, what are the tools available, and how do you really track your patient without impacting your regular business. Obviously, there is a disruption in the business, but unfortunately or fortunately, we need to live with it. How do we really take it forward and take it from that? And the last few lines of just saying on the contact tracing and how would the community spread is happening and how would you do telehealth, sitting at home, how do you really manage this? And you see the last point, 713% increase in use of telehealth solutions. This is again a global record. So how much of solutions are happening? This is typical global survey taken on post this pandemic. So how best this is really pushed to a thing. And obviously all these regulators keep track of it, whether they can monitor it. I'm not seriously saying whether they have done it well or not. They were left with so much little time to get a clinical in place, the testing in place, the kits in place. They just didn't. Obviously, regulators need to grow up. But unfortunately or fortunately, they manage some of this. So it's going to be a lot of technology, not only relating to us, but also the regulators also come into play. So we are also actually in some of the governments we are working with the governments to make them, they are aware of it. They are trained enough to understand some of these things so that when you service a patient right from a private sector, etc., they're also ready for that. And that's very important. This becomes a it's a community in place. It's not only the patient and the private hospital, etc. There's always the government also and the regulators in place. So all these various aspects come into place. It's very critical to understand the whole aspect. Okay, sure. Next one.
So in this section, we are going to talk about what is a lean management and what is a lean waste in the health sector, an indicative key performance indicator for a effective lean management adoption, and what is a plan for future and visualization of patient experience in future when there is effective lean management. So what is a lean management? So from a definition perspective, lean management basically aims at creating value without waste, and it also helps non-value adding or redundant activities get eliminated in this lean management. So lean, from a healthcare perspective, lean is a set of operating philosophies and methods that help to create a maximum value for patient by reducing the waste and wastes. The lean typically emphasizes the consideration for patient needs, employee involvement, and continuous improvement. So take an example for lean in healthcare. So improving patient satisfaction, scheduling appointments, decreasing overtime work, processing paperwork, and increasing clinical revenue. These are just few of areas where hospitals and other healthcare facilities are implementing lean principles, and where we have seen, and this is also been a proven success for many of healthcare organizations. If you take a lean ecosystem, there are 5 principles to it. 1, identify the customer and specific value added, identify and map the value stream, create a flow by eliminating a waste, and organizing the customer pool, and improve continuously. These are some of the basic principles. And the lean ecosystem is where the lean also helps in end-to-end innovation and value delivery ecosystem based on a patient-centric approach, which combines a product platform with a lean portfolio management, which we call as a minimum viable product. So the overall objective of lean is to ensure that all redundant activities are eliminated and it creates a value to the patient without waste. In this slide, we have called out some of the lean waste in healthcare sector. So the main principle again of lean is to reduce the waste. Healthcare organizations in particular have found the approach to be used to reduce the cost and improve the quality of patient satisfaction. Before going into lean waste, we just want to talk about why a lean fails in any organization or a healthcare. Many organizations embark their lean journey by focusing on wrong things. They think lean is more towards cost saving. But in fact, lean is usually associated towards removing waste and improving more from an efficiency perspective, which is typically explained with an example in the slide. Overproduction, wastage arising out of using excessive services where you need not provide a service, but the service has been provided. over processing. There are more documents which are getting processed. Say some of the challenge which patients also face is at the time of registration, they have been asked to fill more documents. So as Mr. Ravi mentioned, there are technology advancement where artificial intelligence is coming into play, and there are people are doing away with this paper requirement. In touch of mobile, appointments are getting scheduled. Next, waiting time. This is also another pain point which many hospitals are trying to address. How am I going to schedule my patient appointments so that the doctor time is also being used effectively, and even the patient handling? Because in case if the waiting time is increased, it is also creating a stress on our nurses and the front office executives. So how am I going to address it? Then underutilization of staff or technologies. So where I have a good physician, where I have a good facility, but still it is not effectively utilized because of the brand not positioned properly. So how am I addressing it? And inventory, which we spoke about, purchasing more stock on more medicine where it is having a working capital impact. And we also have lean waste in defects, where incorrect information which could lead to medical errors. So all information has to be properly captured, otherwise it could lead to any medical errors or incorrect prescriptions. And movement of medicines or patients within the hospital, wherever it is being referred from one hospital to another hospital. We call it as a chain of custody in forensic. So what extent we are relying on that document, or we are performing our own procedure to test it. Finally, the transportation, which talks about we spoke about ambulance, and we also spoke about the patient movement from one hospital to another, or before getting a patient to our hospital, whether the ambulance has all adequate features to ensure that the patient is being kept in a good condition so that we can treat him whenever he comes into emergency care. So all these things are a typical possible domain where we can focus on the lean efficiency. We have called out some of the key performance indicator, because the system that can leverage lean management principle to reduce the waste is the key performance indicator. There are healthcare organizations that have leveraged lean system and have achieved success by applying rigorous clinical data measurement, which we want to mention, because the clinical data measurement is something which helps in achieving this lean efficiency from an operational perspective. This process not only improves the protocol and quality of care, but also explain to others the rationale for improvement, so that it can be a continuous improvement rather than a one-time improvement. Further, through a KPI monitoring, and it is through this diagnostic that the database learning and lean manufacturing gives a very good opportunity for a healthcare system to shape for a better future, where the waste reduction, lower cost, and improved access to care and patient domain becomes very critical. So some of the key performance indicators which we have put and which can be considered for an effective lean management. So one is on patient outcome, and next is on the error rate, and what is on the wait times, and how about employee satisfaction. It is not that patient satisfaction alone has to be considered, we should also consider the employee satisfaction, because retaining good talent is also becoming some of the challenge in healthcare these days. And resource used, what extent, what is the turnaround time? Say a patient has come inside, what is the time I have taken him to move to an inpatient or outpatient? What is the time I am taking to diagnose the patient? What is the time I am taking the patient length of stay? So all these things are some of the key performance indicators for an effective lean management in healthcare sector. Then we are talking about a plan for future basis the lean as a foundation. Over to you, Mr. Ravi. So you are on mute.
Futuristic slide again, but most importantly, again, you're talking about how much is your market position. There's very important competition. I didn't mention about it, so let's touch upon a bit of competition. And how do you not even grow in the market? Survive is going to be very, very critical. Win will come later. So we call it in 3 phases, right? Restore. First is restore. First is respond, restore, and thrive. So first is respond is the current scenario where what is the continuity in keeping your operations going? So if you filled up your hospital from thing, and you're not ready for anything, how do you really respond to the situation to keep your existing patients happy? So that's a very, very critical point. So all these situations on the future is first to respond to keep the continuity going. How do you restore the normal situation? So restore the normal situation is, okay, post this pandemic, how do you really restore patients? You don't lose much on the marketplace. It's very important that you cover up from that front. Then thrive is the typical situation. The new situation, it's not the old situation anymore, the new situation. And that's where back to technology and how much technology can be leveraged. And all this requires 4 or 5 circles we put down the bottom. There is now investments which need to look at technology. Then how much of this virtual health capability, there's so much tools available in the place. How do you really use some of them? How do you really think on that? Third is the workforce. Again, the workforce, there is robots, there is artificial intelligence, VR, AR, etc., etc. How do you really retrain some of them? You don't put the bot in the workforce. You have to use the workforce for better purposes. You just can't replace them because they are all critical resources. But how do you use them better and reuse them better? Skill them better and then you reuse them or whatever that purpose is. And fourth one is the partnership with alliances. This is very critical, right from vendor management, right to risk management, right to your supplier chain, to your various contractors, etc. You're dealing with how do you really do. It's not only the technology providers as well. So you're really in sync with all of them. You're running your operations on day-to-day basis, but it's not only within the hospital, but the extended thing. We call it this extended force. Again, you will see the workforce concept coming into place. There is prediction that most of this workforce will be contractors in the future. That's a very important concept. Somebody's called out 40 or 50% of workforce might be conditional or contingency workers, because it's going to be the future. Because doctors, like doctors who are very important, time-based and consulting in nature, similarly, even the workforce might go into that place. So more of these touchless operations comes into play, more of online things comes into play, and more of patient time is reduced and more of virtual reality comes into place. Even the workforce is going to be more contingent in nature. So it's going to be really interesting as the technology evolves and technology gets absorbed into some of these things. How do we really adapt to that situation? And that's why the workforce contingent workforce, we call that as 40 or 50% is the prediction as you go down the line, that you're ready for that. Again, from the future, it's not futuristic, it's already there according to me. It's just question of tuning your way you look at it, how much really patients you are going to get for critical care, and then go back to your patients at home. And that concept really comes into play. And last one is the supplier chain, which is the vendors risk management. I'm just seeing some chat coming up, right? You're right, so Arvind, that it is very important that you buy discount, you get all the suppliers into place, you know the end-to-end chain vendors. But from a supply chain perspective, really, are the medicines really on stock, really on delivery on time, and then between your pharmas and pharma companies and that very chain? We've seen this process, sir, but really from a bigger perspective of hospitals, it's always a challenge, right? From equipment to devices, replacement, goods and non-replaceables, and then comes the pharma. If you really speaking between the pharma gloves and all that equipment and also the medicines, okay, we find that disposables, non-disposables, always a different area, and the pharma is a different area. So we need to be really sync in with some of these things. And we've seen when we do all these counts and inventory, taking all that, always the disposables, non-disposables is always a challenge. And pharma is pretty easy to handle, but then again, from a drug perspective, expiry, etc., we need to place. So all this linkages in the current situation, in the future, if it's online, and the supply is also, unfortunately, technology should be also there for all of them to make sure that all their things are in sync. And this all will come into play because currently all the things are all tied up with long-term contracts, and they have more in stake for the pharma companies, healthcare companies to be in sync. So there are two ends to it. That's not in the healthcare, we call that as life sciences. The life sciences, the pharma companies who differently deal with it will be very critical. So this 4 or 5 pillars comes into play: workforce, alliances, supplier chain, virtual health capability, and then what are the cash flows that we're really looking for that. Go ahead, Sri. So we just put that as a map. The right-hand side, I just call out the slide. Those right names are just some tools we use. I don't have the time right now to show the tools. People are interested, we can take care. So the left-hand side is all this evidence documentation, transformation, supply chain. We called out some of these experiences. And you see some of the patient are end-to-end connected using some of these tools. There are health plans which are connected with your healthcare employers. I didn't call them out, the insurance providers. Then the optimization, how do you really, revenue generation, are we really on sync on some of that? And the safety regulatory compliances aspect. So these are 10 or 12 aspects. There is Deloitte website which calls out all these things. There is actually a podcast which has about 4 or 6 hours of all these materials together. People are interested, I can share it through Chamber. I call this out because there are excellent tools in the marketplace as well. It's not very specific from this perspective, but we use a lot of these materials now. Even for one of the states or two of the states, we are involved working with them right from a diagnostic perspective. It's called a Converge Health care system. Right from next slide, I will show some of that, where the patient is connected right to the hospital, right to your treatment side. So the complete chain from admission to treatment to healthcare is taken care. And then the government agency also comes into place to keep track of the patient. So this is more robotic and then more digitized sort of thing. So some of these tools, this is not new. This pandemic was not new for us. We've been working on some of these technologies for some time. I thought I just put it for knowledge purpose, nothing else here. But some of this whole, there are so many tools in the market. If you want to take a look at it, we can share it them at a later time. I just wanted to bring it to your attention, these things which we use. Next, and this is one of the patient healthcare slides. So if you write from the enrollment to recruitment, and then what are the easier things happening. And if you see various stages, how this is set up, how the access this thing is all automated. And this is one of the Converge Health tool which we use. And then how the communication happens, how the nurses taken care or nurses take care. And all these are automated processes. This is what one of the tools we use to take it forward. Why we had to put it up? From a perspective of, this is not only from a healthcare perspective, we have our own people in our own office. We have to keep them informed. So we're using it for some of them. It's not as if Deloitte has no COVID patients. We have already got reported COVID patients. There are people who have died as well, not here also in India, but abroad. So we have to keep track of them. And some of the tools we are using to our own purposes. So it's very important that we engage with them and complete care is taken care of them. So we track them from an office perspective, a central channel perspective. So I just put that slide. This is one of the tools we use, Patient Connect, and then there is something called Converge Health as well. Okay, next. I think we are coming to end of the session, close to the session, which is just some of the unique, I thought we just picked up some of the, we had a lot of medical healthcare specialists. So I thought I should pick up some of the snapshots for some of those things. You see, really speaking, 4 or 5 pillars. One is from the radical interoperability of the data and all that. So some of these snippets, which some of them have said, it's very interesting. I just thought maybe I should share it with you. First one was on when you can connect those data sets, actually paint a broader picture. So if you connect all the data sets, all the data which a patient has got in hospital, how much you can connect with all of them. And most of them, even today, are manual records. So if you can automate some of them and really you put a patient care in place and you digitize some of them, it'll be very useful to know. And second one is on the regulatory push. So it's not only the regulatory push and the consumer push also happening. So if you all put together, you have organizations to, okay, it's a very important point, siloed kind of mentality. So regulators are having something, the data something, even between the revenue side and the finance side, those can disconnected. This can't go on. It has to be all united and all working in one sync, and technology also to really sync. And so again, data, we just mentioned about interoperability in data. And last, very interesting right-hand side, was the abundance of optimism is the race for the solution. This is clearly from a risk perspective. There are so many questions being asked. There's always this, like your typical pandemic and your vaccine coming into place. There is always thing, but it's better to be prepared for that instead of running around. Unfortunately, not enough countries are very well prepared from a risk perspective. This anticipate something, be prepared for it. When it comes, you're ready for that. And that's why we put that point. Across our innovative ideas of analyzing, utilizing, and even commercializing the data using technologies. Now, commercializing is slightly pushing it afar, but then how data really is getting uniquely challenged. Data is like your ATM thing. One of the examples, next one is very interesting. Just I'll go to the next one. If you think about the financial service industry, banking at one organization and still go to an ATM another bank and pick money out. That's what they're trying to do in a regulatory space with healthcare. Being able to go to another clinician, have your information there, or be able to have it coordinated. It's very important. It's maybe not very far off that data is available about a patient on the system, subject to security and privacy questions being addressed. But then it's very important. You can visit any doctor anytime close by, you can pick it up. And that's why it's all the things which are coming on board. It's not a question of shortage of doctors, but because of the technology platform, data available there, you can use it and take it forward. And that's a very, very, very critical statement made. And that's one from our medical principle. Next one, please, Sri. Can you go to the next slide?
Yes, sir. This is the last slide.
So last one is are patients out of patient. That's a very important heading. So they are making choices and they will drive things. So it's not as if regulator was saying, the patient themselves are deciding a lot of things they want thing. And how do you really healthcare owns up the data, passes on the data, and how transformation will happen.
Mr. Ravi as well as Mr. Srivatsan. It was a wonderful session, and I thank all the participants, doctors, for taking time off to attend the program, all the sessions. So